The rain hammered the roof like fists on a coffin lid, and I stood there in the downpour, watching my neighbor's world shatter through the plate glass window of his living room. Elias, 59 and crumbling, clutched the divorce papers in one trembling hand while his wife of 34 years, now ex, I guess, slammed the door behind her, her taillights vanishing into the storm-slicked street of our quiet Seattle suburb. I can't pretend anymore, Eli, she'd spat earlier, her voice slicing through the air like a switchblade. Not for you, not for the kids, not for this lie we've called a life. And just like that, the man who'd fixed my leaky faucet last summer, who'd waved hello with a thermos of black coffee every dawn, was alone, utterly, gut-wrenchingly alone. I should have turned away, minded my own damn business, but my feet carried me across the lawn, socks squelching in the mud, heart pounding harder than the thunder. By the time I reached his porch, he was on his knees amid the shards of a shattered vase, blood trickling from a gash on his palm where the jagged porcelain had bitten deep. Caleb, his voice cracked like old leather, eyes lifting to mine, storm gray and drowning. What the hell are you doing out here? I dropped to my knees beside him, ignoring the water pooling around us, and wrapped my hand over his, stemmed the blood with the hem of my soaked hoodie. Same thing you're doing, Elias. Bleeding. That night, we didn't talk about the papers or the wife who'd finally fled the closet she'd locked them both in. Instead, I dragged him inside, brewed the strongest pot of coffee this side of the Cascades, and sat with him on the sagging plaid couch that smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and regret. Elias Harlan, retired high school history teacher, widower in waiting to a marriage that had been DOA for decades, poured it out in fits and starts, how he'd known since he was 16, sneaking peeks at the quarterback in the locker room showers, how he'd buried it under lesson plans and PTA meetings, how the kids, now grown and scattered, would never understand. I thought I could be straight enough, he muttered, staring at the coffee mug like it held the secrets to rewriting history. For them. For her. But God, Caleb, it ate me alive. I nodded, my own secrets coiling tight in my chest. At 28, I come out at 18, loud and proud in the halls of my Tacoma high school, only to learn that pride didn't pay the rent or mend the bridges burned with family who called it a phase. I'd moved to this rainy corner of Queen and Hill 2 years ago, chasing freelance graphic design gigs and the illusion of starting over. But listening to Elias, his voice gravelly with unshed sobs, I felt that old ache, the one that said healing wasn't a solo sport. You're not straight enough, I said softly, squeezing his good hand. You're just Elias. And that's gonna have to be enough now. By dawn, the storm had broken, leaving Seattle draped in that ethereal mist that makes the city feel like a half-remembered dream. Elias crashed on the couch, bandaged and exhausted, while I rummaged through his fridge, stale bread, wilted lettuce, a six-pack of Rainier that had gone flat. I whipped up eggs scrambled with whatever herbs I could scrounge, the sizzle of butter in the pan a small rebellion against the silence. When he woke, shuffling into the kitchen in his threadbare robe, he looked at the plate I slid across the Formica counter like it was manna. You don't have to do this, kid, he grumbled, but his eyes, those weary, wise eyes, said otherwise. Kid, I shot back, sliding into the chair opposite him with my own plate. I'm the one who just saved your ass from tetanus. Call me that again, and I'll make you eat it with a fork. A ghost of a smile cracked his salt and pepper beard. Fair enough, Caleb. Fair enough. That was the start of it, the quiet invasion of my life into his, and his into mine. Mornings became ritual. I'd knock on his back door at 6:45, armed with fresh ground beans from the roastery down on Pike Street, and we'd sit at his scarred oak table, plotting the day's small conquests. Elias wasn't one for therapy, too many years grading essays on Freud to trust a couch session, but he'd talk to me in that measured baritone honed from decades of lecturing on the American Revolution. About the boy in '64 who'd kissed him under the bleachers at a sock hop, only to vanish into the draft. About the wife, Margaret, who'd sensed the distance but chalked it up to his brooding artist soul. He'd dabbled in woodworking, carving decoys that fetched top dollar at the Fremont Fair. About the terror of 60 looming like a guillotine, whispering that it was too late to live true. I'd counter with my own war stories. The ex-boyfriend in college who'd ghosted me after I caught him cheating with his TA. The mom who'd sent Christmas cards that arrived like indictments, all praying for you, son. The freelance drought that had me sketching logos for craft breweries at 3 a.m., fueled by Red Bull and resentment. But with Elias, it wasn't trading scars, it was stitching them. He'd lean back in his chair, pipe clenched unlit between his teeth, and say things like, "History's full of men who loved wrong, Caleb. Lincoln had his speed. Wilde had his Bosie. You're in good company, and damn if that didn't make the knot in my gut loosen, just a fraction." Week 2, I dragged him out of the house, kicking and cursing, but out. We hit the Elliott Bay Book Company first, where the musty aisles swallowed us whole. Elias's fingers trailed the spines like old lovers, lingering on a dog-eared copy of Giovanni's Room. "Baldwin knew," he murmured, flipping to a passage underlined in faded pencil. "If I were in love with a man, I would want him to know it." His voice caught, and I pretended not to notice the way his hand brushed mine as we paid at the register. From there, the waterfront, salt air whipping off the sound, ferries cutting wakes like silver arrows. We shared a basket of fish and chips from Ivor's, grease dripping onto newsprint, laughing as gulls dive-bombed for scraps. "When's the last time you did this?" I asked, tossing a fry to a particularly bold bird. He thought, brow furrowing under the brim of his faded mariner's cap. "With the kids, maybe. Before cell phones turned em into zombies." A pause, then softer, "Never like this. Never." Free. That word hung between us, heavy as the fog rolling in. Free. I wanted to tell him it was a myth, that coming out just swapped one cage for another, but his face, lined with laugh lines earned the hard way, glowed in the slanting sun, and I swallowed it down. Instead, I bumped his shoulder with mine. "Stick with me, old man. We'll make you allergic to chains." By the end of the month, Elias was changing. Not the overnight miracle of rom-coms, but the slow thaw of permafrost. He shaved the beard down to silver stubble that made him look like a rogue professor from an Ivy League flick, swapped the pipe for herbal tea that smelled like a witch's garden, even joined me for runs along the Burke-Gilman Trail, his loping stride keeping pace with my sprint despite the 20 extra years and 30 pounds of dad bod he wore like a badge. We'd pound the gravel path, breath fogging in the chill, and he'd regale me with tales of teaching, how he'd smuggled queer history into his curriculum, footnotes on Stonewall tucked between Gettysburg and Vietnam. One evening, after a particularly grueling 5-miler that left us both wheezing on his porch swing, he cracked open a couple of IPAs from the cooler I'd stashed in his fridge. The sun dipped low, painting the Olympics in bruised purples, and the neighborhood hummed with the distant bark of dogs and sizzle of barbecues. "Caleb," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. "You know why I never left her? Margaret. I took a swig, the hops bitter on my tongue. Guilt. Worse. Fear. His gaze fixed on the horizon, voice dropping to that confessional timbre. Fear that if I admitted it to her, to me, I'd wake up one day and it'd be too late to matter. That I'd die with it all bottled up, like some spineless footnote in my own life. The swing creaked under our weight, the silence stretching taut. I could smell his aftershave, Old Spice, clean and timeless, mingling with the pine from his backyard. My pulse thrummed, not from the run. "It's not too late," I whispered, turning to him. Our eyes locked, and in that gray storm, I saw it, the spark, the question, the dare. He set his beer down, deliberate, and cupped my jaw with calloused fingers that trembled just once. "No," he breathed. "It's not." Then his lips met mine, tentative at first, like testing thin ice, then deepening with the hunger of decades denied. Salt and yeast and truth, his beard rasping soft against my skin, hands tangling in my hair as the world narrowed to this porch, this kiss, this man who'd risen from ashes I hadn't even known were burning. We broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed together, laughter bubbling up through the shock. "Christ, Elias," I panted. "You kiss like you teach thorough." He chuckled, low and rumbling. "Practice makes perfect, kid." Or in my case, desperation. That night, we didn't cross the threshold, not yet. But the line had blurred, irrevocably, and as I walked the 10 steps back to my place, the rain starting up again in a fine mist, I knew this was no neighborly favor. This was the start of something that could either save us both or drag us under. The weeks that followed were a fever dream wrapped in flannel and fog, Seattle's autumn conspiring to cocoon us in its gray embrace. Elias and I fell into a rhythm that felt both ancient and newborn. Lazy Sundays spent carving wooden ornaments in his garage workshop, sawdust coating our skin like fairy dust. Tuesday evenings at the Alki Beach bonfires, where we'd huddle under wool blankets, sharing stories of first crushes while the Pacific whispered secrets to the shore. He'd open up more with every shared glance, every brush of knuckles over checkers on his coffee table. The terror of AIDS in the 80s, watching friends vanish like smoke. The quiet joy of mentoring a closeted student in the 90s, slipping him a copy of The Front Runner with a note that read, "You're not alone." I was his ghost ally, Elias confessed one night, firelight dancing in his eyes. Couldn't be mine, but damn if I didn't try for him. I'd counter with my own confessions, vulnerabilities spilling like overproof bourbon. How my dad, a burly longshoreman from Everett, had walked out of my coming out dinner without a word, only to die 2 years later from a heart attack, leaving me with unanswered voicemails and a lifetime of what-ifs. He never called back, I admitted, tracing patterns in the sand with a stick. Just silence. Like I was the punchline to a joke he couldn't stomach. Elias pulled me close then, his arm a solid anchor around my shoulders, chin resting atop my head. "Silence is the coward's blade, Caleb. But you're here, writing your own ending." Our first real date, though we'd never called it that, was at the Pike Place Market on a crisp November morning, the air thick with the tang of smoked salmon and fresh-baked sourdough. I showed up at his door with a bouquet of wild asters pilfered from the community garden, their purple petals defiant against the drizzle. For the man who taught me history, I said, thrusting them forward with a grin, but never how to flirt with one. He took them, bemused, then tucked one behind my ear with a tenderness that stole my breath. Flirt? Boy, I've been romancing you since you fixed my porch light. His wink was pure mischief, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes like well-worn maps. We wandered the stalls hand in hand, a quiet rebellion against the stares, subtle, but there, from the fishmongers tossing silver kings and the tourists snapping selfies. Elias bought me a leather-bound journal from a street vendor, its pages crisp and waiting. For your sketches, he rumbled, and whatever else brews in that beautiful head. Later, over chowder in steaming bread bowls at a hole in the wall overlooking the sound, he admitted the fear that still gnawed at him, the kids. Sarah, 32 and a lawyer in Portland, sharp as a tack and twice as unyielding. Tommy, 29, a tech whiz in Silicon Valley, more interested in algorithms than emotions. They'll hate me, he said, spoon pausing midway to his mouth. Not for leaving their mom, hell. She deserves better, but for who I am underneath it all. I reached across the scarred wooden table, lacing our fingers. Or they'll love you more for finally showing up as you. Give him time, Elias. Like you gave me, that night, back in his bungalow with its creaky floorboards and walls papered in faded florals. We crossed the line we'd towed for weeks. It started with a slow dance in the living room, Coltrane on the old turntable, his hands warm on my waist, mine draped over his broad shoulders. You're trembling? I murmured against his neck, inhaling the cedar of his skin. So are you, he replied, voice husky. Nerves or want? Both. Always both. We tumbled to the rug in a tangle of limbs and laughter, clothes shedding like old skins. His body solid, mapped with silver hairs and faint scars from a lifetime of labor, was a revelation. Not the chiseled Adonis of apps and hookups, but a landscape of lived-in strength, every curve and callus a story I ached to learn. He moved with the patience of someone who'd waited eons, kisses trailing fire down my spine, whispers of mine and finally against my ear. When we crested together, the world fracturing into shards of light and gasp, it wasn't just release, it was resurrection. Afterward, slick and spent, we lay entwined under a quilt pieced from his mother's hands, the rain pattering a lullaby on the tin roof. I love you, he said into the dark, the words simple as breathing, profound as scripture. I turned in his arms, tracing the laugh lines that bracketed his mouth. Took you long enough to say it, Harlan, but love, in all its messy glory, doesn't exist in a vacuum. Cracks began to spiderweb by December, subtle at first, like frost on a windshield. Elias threw himself into the holidays with a fervor that bordered on frantic, baking gingerbread men that came out lopsided and fierce, stringing lights along the eaves until the block glowed like a landing strip. Gotta make it right for the kids' visit, he'd mutter, flour dusting his flannel shirt. Sarah and Tommy were due for Christmas, their first trip back since the divorce papers hit. I played along, helping deck the halls with boughs of holly and strings of cranberries, but unease gnawed at me. We were a secret still, our touches confined to stolen moments when the curtains were drawn. Just till after the holiday, he'd promised, cupping my face in the dim kitchen light. Don't want to blindside him, I nodded, swallowing the bitterness. Your call, Elias. But secrets have a way of rotting from the inside. The night before they arrived, Tension crackled like static. We'd planned a quiet dinner, roast chicken with rosemary from his herb box, a bottle of cab from the cellar he'd dug out from under the stairs. But as I basted the bird, he paced the linoleum, wringing his hands. What if they see it? In my eyes? Or, God, Caleb, what if they ask about you? I set down the brush, turning to him with arms crossed over my sauce-stained apron. Then you tell him. This is Caleb, the guy who's been keeping your old man from turning into a hermit. Or hell, the man I love. Pick your poison. His face crumpled, stormy eyes pleading. It's not that simple. They're my blood. And I'm what? Chopped liver. The words lashed out sharper than I intended, born of too many nights wondering if I was rebound or revelation. He flinched, stepping back as if slapped. You're everything, damn it. But this us, it's new. Fragile. I won't shatter it by dropping a bomb on Christmas Eve. The oven timer dinged, shrill as an alarm, and we ate in silence, the chicken drying out like our words. I left before dessert, the door clicking shut behind me like a period at the end of an unfinished sentence. Christmas morning dawned brittle and bright, snow dusting the evergreens like powdered sugar. From my kitchen window, I watched the Harlans arrive, Sarah's sleek Audi purring up the drive, Tommy's hybrid hatchback trailing like a loyal pup. Hugs on the porch, laughter that carried on the wind, Elias enveloped in their arms like a king reclaimed. No sign of me in that tableau, just the ghost next door nursing black coffee and a grudge. By evening, the block party was in full swing, eggnog flowing, carols belted off-key from the Andersons' garage. I almost stayed home, binging It's a Wonderful Life for the irony, but pride or masochism drove me out. Bundled in my peacoat, I wandered the luminarias lining the sidewalks, the glow casting long shadows that danced like accusations. That's when I saw them, Elias and Sarah, deep in conversation by the punch bowl, her hand on his arm, brow furrowed in that lawyerly way. Tommy hovered nearby, scrolling his phone, oblivious. I hung back, half hidden by the throng of neighbors toasting marshmallows over portable pits, but Elias's voice cut through the din, low and laced with desperation. It wasn't about you, honey. Or your brother. It was me, all me. I loved your mom. I did, but not the way she deserved. Not the way. Sarah's voice rose, sharp as a scalpel. The way a man should, Dad. If this is some midlife crisis bullshit, just say it. Don't drag us into your therapy hour. A pause. Then Elias, steady as bedrock, no crisis. Just truth. I've always been gay, Sarah. Always. The world tilted. Gasps rippled from nearby clusters, Mrs. Patel from across the street, frozen mid-sip, old Mr. Kowalski, pipe dangling forgotten. Tommy looked up, phone forgotten, face paling. Wait, what? I should have bolted then, spared myself the fallout, but my feet rooted like the madrona trees clawing the hillside. Sarah's laugh was brittle, shattering. Gay? To 59? Dad? That's not a coming-out story. That's a punchline. After Mom picked up the pieces for 30 years? You're unbelievable. Elias's shoulders sagged. The weight of empires. I know I hurt her. God, I know. But hiding it hurt us all more. Tommy stepped forward, awkward but earnest. Hey! Okay. I mean, we love you, Dad. But this? Now? It's a lot. They clustered then. A huddle of whispers and stiff embraces, the party swirling on oblivious around them. I turned away, chest tight, the cold seeping through my coat like regret. Elias caught my eye across the yard, his expression a plea, wait for me, but I couldn't. Not tonight. Back in my apartment, the walls closed in, echoing with what-ifs. I poured a tumbler of bourbon, neat, and sank onto the couch, the journal he'd given me mocking from the side table. Flipping it open, I sketched furiously, his face, not the joyful one from our runs, but this, lined with defiance and defeat, eyes holding the fire of a man reborn, even as the world tried to snuff it. Midnight came and went, chimes from the grandfather clock down the block tolling like a funeral dirge. A knock rattled my door, soft, insistent. I opened it to Elias, snowflakes melting in his hair, cheeks ruddy from more than the chill. They took it. Okay. I think, he said, stepping inside without invitation, shedding his coat like a skin. Hurt, confused, but they didn't run. Sarah even cracked a joke about redecorating my closet. I closed the door, leaning against it. And you outed us both to half the neighborhood. He winced, but his eyes sparked. Worth it. For this. Then he was on me, kissing with the ferocity of survival, hands framing my face as if I were his North Star. We stumbled to the bedroom, shedding layers, the heat between us a bonfire against the winter night. No fragility now, just raw, unapologetic need, his body claiming mine with a certainty that erased the doubts. As we lay tangled in sheets gone cold, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my chest, he whispered, I told them about you, too. At the end, Caleb's the one who pulled me out of the dark. My heart stuttered. What did they say? Sarah. About time you had a decent influence. Tommy. Send him my Steam library. Gotta vet the boyfriend. He chuckled, the sound vibrating through me. We're okay, Kel. Messy, but okay. For the first time in years, I believed it. But Seattle winters are long, and secrets, once cracked open, have a way of freezing over again. January slunk in on the heels of a polar vortex, blanketing the city in ice that turned every sidewalk into a skating rink and every commute into a curse-laden ballet. Elias and I hunkered down, our worlds orbiting closer, mornings tangled in his bed, the scent of bacon and betrayal from the kitchen below, evenings lost in Netflix marathons, his head on my lap as we dissected Brokeback Mountain for the umpteenth time. Ennis was me, he'd say, fingers interlacing with mine. Scared shitless of the mountain, I tease, ruffling his hair gone more salt than pepper. Yeah, but you got Jack. And no sheep. The kid's visit lingered like a half-healed bruise. Sarah texted Elias sporadically, polite probes masked as check-ins. Mom's seeing a therapist. How's the weather? Tommy was warmer, forwarding memes about late-blooming icons like Sir Ian, but the subtext screamed caution. Don't fuck this up, Dad. Elias fielded it all with his trademark stoicism, but I saw the toll. The way his laugh lines deepened into furrows when his phone buzzed at odd hours. Me? I was all in, deeper than I'd planned. Freelance wires cross states lines now, logos for Portland startups and Boise bakeries, but my sketches filled with him. Elias whittling by the window, light gilding his profile, Elias laughing mid-story, throat bobbing with mirth. He noticed, of course, hung one in his workshop, titled it The Healer in Sharpie on the frame. "That's you, looking at me," he said, thumbing my chin. "Like I'm worth the stare." "Always were," I replied, pulling him close. But beneath the romance, a shadow loomed, my own, the one I'd outrun from Tacoma but couldn't shake. My mom, the devout one who'd prayed me straight with novenas and tears, had been radio silent since Thanksgiving. Then, a card arrived, pink envelope, cursive script wishing healing for the new year. No return address, but the postmark screamed home. I crumpled it, but the doubt unfurled like smoke. One blustery afternoon, as we shoveled the shared drive, steam rising from our breaths, flakes stinging our cheeks, Elias dropped the bomb. "Margaret wants to talk. In person. Tomorrow." I paused, spade mid-scoop, snow cascading off the blade. "About closure," she says. "The house, the settlement. Us." He leaned on his shovel, face unreadable. "I have to go, Cal. For the kids' sake." Jealousy flared, hot and irrational, a green-eyed beast I'd thought tamed. "Us? As in, the sham? Or the truth?" His eyes narrowed, frost glittering on his lashes. "Both." She deserves to hear it from me, not the neighborhood grapevine. I stabbed the snow harder, chunks flying like shrapnel. "And I deserve to come with you? Or am I still the dirty little secret?" He straightened, voice steel. "This isn't about you. It's unfinished business, 34 years of it." The words landed like a sucker punch. I dropped the spade, wiping gloved hands on my jeans. "Unfinished? Christ. Elias, you're 59, not 19. When does your life start being about now?" He stepped closer, breath mingling with mine. "It does. Every damn day with you. But I can't burn bridges without crossing him first." We stood there, impasse etched in ice, until he cupped my neck, pulling me into a kiss that tasted of salt and sorry. "Come with me," he murmured against my lips. "If you want." I wanted to say no, to let him face the dragon alone, but love's a stubborn bastard. "Fine. But no more half measures." The meeting was at a coffee shop in Ballard, neutral ground, all exposed brick and overpriced lattes. Margaret arrived first, poised in a cashmere wrap, her blonde bob impeccable despite the wind. She was beautiful still, in that polished way of women who'd traded passion for practicality. But her eyes, blue and brittle, held the ghosts of what-ifs. Elias introduced me with a hand on my lower back. "This is Caleb, my partner." Her gaze flicked over me, appraising, not unkind, before settling on him. "Partner. Ah. Suits you better than tweed jackets and tenure tracks." We ordered, her a chamomile, him a black drip, me an Americano to armor my nerves, and settled into a corner booth, the hum of baristas a buffer against the awkward. What followed was no tear-streaked showdown, but a dissection, clinical, compassionate. She spoke of the loneliness, the suspicions confirmed too late, he of the guilt, the gratitude for her grace. "I should have been braver sooner," he said, voice rough. "You deserved a whole man." Margaret stirred her tea, steam curling like unspoken sighs. "I got half a husband, Eli. Better than nothing, but not enough." Then, to me, "You make him light up. Like he used to, before the wait." I nodded, throat tight. He's teaching me how to carry mine. By the end, handshakes all around. No hugs, but a truce. As we walked out into the sleet, her car idling curbside, she paused. Take care of him, Caleb. And tell him, I'm glad he found his mountain. Driving home through slush-choked streets, Elias was quiet, hand heavy on my thigh. That went better than I dreamed. Yeah, I agreed, but the knot in my chest tightened. Closure for them, but for us, it felt like the first act of a play with no script. February brought Valentine's, cheesy as a Hallmark aisle, but we leaned in. Elias surprised me with a picnic in his greenhouse, a lean-to affair bursting with heirloom tomatoes and basil that defied the frost. No snow dates, he quipped, spreading a red-checkered blanket amid the pots. Champagne chilled in a bucket, strawberries dipped in chocolate he'd melted himself, lumpy but earnest. We fed each other bites, laughter echoing off glass panes fogged with our breath. Remember our first kiss? He asked, licking chocolate from his thumb. Porch swing. Rain. You tasting like IPA and infinity. His smile faded. I serious. I want more of those. Forever ones. My heart tripped. Marriage? Not legally, not yet. But commitment. Rings, vows, the works. If you'll have an old fossil like me. Tears pricked. Joy and terror twinned. Hell yes. We made love there. On the blanket surrounded by green life. Slow and sacred. His vows whispered into my skin. I choose you. Every dawn. But fate, that cruel curator, had other plans. Mid-March, as crocuses pushed through the thawing earth, my phone rang, unknown number, Tacoma area code. Mom's voice, frail as rice paper. Caleb? Cancer. Stage 4. Come home. The world grayed. Elias held me as I sobbed, plans shattering like cheap crystal. Go, he urged, packing my bag with flannel and granola bars. Family's family. I'll be here. The drive south was a blur. Rain-lashed I-5, wipers slapping time to my pulse. Mom looked diminished in her hospital gown, chemo-ravaged but eyes fierce. Dad's ghost loomed in the empty chair, but she squeezed my hand. I was wrong, son. About you. About us. Forgive. Tears blurred the monitor's beeps. Always, Mom. 2 weeks became a vigil. Nights in the recliner by her bed. Days fetching Jell-O and bad coffee. Elias called daily. Voice a lifeline. Proud of you. Love you. But distance bred doubt. Her sermons, softened now, still echoed old wounds. Then, the betrayal not his, but mine. Exhausted, I sought solace in a bar near the hospital, nursing a whiskey when an old hookup, Jake, the college ghost, slid onto the stool beside me. Caleb? Shit, man, you look wrecked. 1 drink became 2, confessions 3. His hand on my knee, sympathetic. Wanna get out of here? Blow off steam. I went. Stupid, reckless, a motel room, tangled sheets, regret sour as bile. Dawn found me fleeing, Jake snoring, guilt a lead weight. Back at the hospital, Mom slept peaceful, but my phone lit with Elias's text. Miss you. Call when you can. I didn't. Couldn't. The lie festered, a cancer of my own making. April bloomed cruel, Mom slipping away on a Tuesday, petals of pain. Funeral was Methodist, hymns and whispers, Sarah and Tommy flying in for me, not knowing the half. Elias waited at Seattle-Tacoma, arms open, but I pulled back. Need space, I mumbled, the motel ghost haunting my eyes. He searched my face, hurt dawning. What happened, Cal? Nothing, lie one. Weeks dragged, our haven fracturing. I buried in work, designs for Seattle's Pride float, ironic armor while he carved decoys that grew sharper, more jagged. Fights erupted over nothing. Forgotten dishes, late nights. You're pulling away, he'd accuse, voice cracking. You're smothering, I'd snap, the truth twisted. The climax crashed on a humid May eve, storm clouds boiling over the sound. I came home to find him on my porch, suitcase at his feet, face carved from granite. Found the receipt. Motel in Tacoma. Jake's credit card. Yeah, I looked you up. Old habits. My stomach plummeted. Elias. It was one night. I was broken, Mom. The grief. One night. His laugh was hollow, wind-whipped. After everything, I bared my soul. Caleb. 59 years of it. And you? You ran to some fuckboy ghost. Thunder growled. First fat drops splattering. It meant nothing. You're everything. Too late for that. He shouldered the bag, eyes wet. I healed you, or tried. But you just cracked me wider. He walked into the rain, taillights of his old Ford blurring red streaks down the hill. I chased, but the storm swallowed me whole, sobbing, soaked, alone with the wreckage. Summer scorched Seattle that year, an anomaly of blue skies and barbecues that mocked my monochrome world. Elias's bungalow went dark, curtains drawn, no morning coffee wafting over the fence. Neighbors whispered, divorce blues, poor guy. If only they knew the half, the man who'd bloomed like a late rose, only to wither in my hands. I threw myself into Pride Month prep, sketching rainbow banners that bled my regret in CMYK. Sarah cornered me at a volunteer mixer, her lawyer poise cracking just enough. Dad's a mess, Caleb. Won't say why, but it's you. Fix it. Can't fix what I broke, I muttered, paintbrush trembling. Tommy was gentler, over IPAs at a Capitol Hill dive. He's scared, man. Of loving big, losing bigger. But he talks about you, like you're the revolution he lived through. Their words were lifelines, but I drowned in guilt's undertow. Jake? Blocked. Deleted. A footnote I'd burn if I could. Therapy helped. A queer counselor named Ravi, with a beard like Elias's and insights sharp as sushi knives. Betrayal's a mirror, he said. What do you see? Myself. Flawed. Fleeing. A coward. June's end brought the march. Tens of thousands snaking through downtown. Drums thumping like heartbeats. Signs screaming love wins. I marched alone. Rainbow flag draped like a cape. But midway through Pioneer Square, there he was, Elias, at the float's edge, carving station set up with whittling tools and blanks. Kids clustered, shaping hearts from basswood under his guidance. Our eyes met over the crowd, his widening, mine pleading. He nodded once, grave as a vow, and handed a half-carved dove to a freckled boy. For the man who taught me to fly, the kid parroted, scampering off. The parade pulsed on, but I veered to him, pulse hammering louder than the bass. Elias, Caleb, neutral, but his hands, those hands that knew every inch of me, fidgeted with a knife. I fucked up. Monumentally. That night. It wasn't you. It was me, running from the pain, from losing her, from fearing we'd crash like this. He exhaled, shoulders easing a fraction. I know grief, Kel. Buried my dad at 20. But trust? That's the bone I can't reset. Tears stung, salt on the summer air. Then let me earn it. No more ghosts. Just us messy, real. A float rumbled past. Drag queens tossing glitter that caught in his hair like stars. He stepped closer, voice low. Sarah and Tommy. They pushed me here. Said if I loved you, I'd show up. Even after. Hope flickered, fragile as the dove in that kid's fist. And I'm here. His hand found mine, calluses rough against my palm. But slow, Caleb. No more avalanches. We walked then, parade forgotten, to a quiet bench overlooking the frenzy. He talked, raw, unfiltered, of the void without me. Sleepless nights carving until his fingers bled, dreams of our greenhouse picnic twisted into nightmares. I confessed the therapy, the sketches I'd burned and salvaged, the realization that love wasn't a cure-all but a choice, daily. By dusk, as the crowd thinned to after-parties and alleyway hookups, he kissed me, gentle, tentative, tasting of sawdust and second chances. One day at a time, he murmured. Deal. Fall crept in golden, leaves carpeting the paths we reclaimed, runs turning to walks, hands linked unashamed. Elias's kids visited again. Thanksgiving this time, turkey thawing on my counter as Sarah grilled me over pie crusts. Heard him again. I'll sue your ass into next century. But her hug was fierce. Tommy's fist bump genuine. Margaret even sent a card. Happiness suits you both. Winter tested us. My freelance boom meant late nights. His volunteer gig at the LGBTQ center pulling him into evenings of storytelling for wide-eyed teens. Fights flared. Over forgotten anniversaries, our first kiss. Porch swing marked with champagne. Over my habit of bottling stress. But we learned therapy doubles dates with Ravi. Date nights at the Rep for Angels in America, where we wept in the dark for men like us. Spring 2026 bloomed with possibility. Elias proposed on our anniversary, not with a ring, but a carved box containing 2 silver bands, etched with coordinates. Our porch, that rainy night. Not legal yet, he said, kneeling in the garden we'd planted together. Roses for him, lavender for me. But binding. You in, sobbing, laughing. I pulled him up. Idiot. Yes, the ceremony was backyard simple. Justice of the peace under the madronas. Sarah officiating with mock gravity. Tommy DJing Springsteen. Neighbors toasted with Rainier. The Andersons' kid, now taller, presenting the dove. Wings finished. Margaret came, glass raised, to late starters and happy endings. We honeymooned in the San Juans, ferry to Orcas, cabin by the sea. Nights tangled in flannel, days hiking trails where eagles wheeled overhead. Surprised? He asked one dawn, as we watched the sun gild the waves. Completely, I whispered, head on his chest. You healed me. 2. Life post-vows wasn't fairy tale flawless. Elias's sciatica flared with rain. My gigs dried up in economic dips. Arguments over chores echoed like old radio static. But we chose each other. Daily. Coffee at dawn. Hands held through storms. Stories shared in the quiet hours. At 59, he'd lost a marriage, gained a life. At 29, I'd lost my ghost, found my anchor. In the end, it wasn't the surprise of love that floored me. It was the endurance. Human, flawed, profoundly ours. And in Seattle's endless drizzle, we thrived.